the straight right landing solidly on the scar that ran from the left corner of the sergeant's mouth up past his left eye. Somebody had laid his face open with a knife in some previous fracas. Meanwhile, one of the other troopers had reached Ace. The man tried to grab him, but Ace got hold of the man's arm instead, pivoted, threw a hip into him, bent, and hauled the man off his feet. The trooper let out a surprised yell as he flew through the air and crashed down on his back. Over by the table where the men had been sitting, the heavily painted saloon girl who had set off this explosion of fisticuffs by yelping when the sergeant got too rough in his pawing of her, clapped her hands to her cheeks and screamed. The cry had sort of a perfunctory sound to it, as if she had witnessed dozens of brawls like this and knew the part she was supposed to play in it. Ace tried to avoid the other men who came after him, but there were too many of them. Two of them seized his arms and forced him back against the bar. Another man loomed in front of Ace, fists poised to move in and pound him, while the other two held him. Instead, Ace drew his legs up and lashed out with them. His boot heels caught the attacker in the chest and flung him backward, completely out of control. He came down atop a table, the legs of which cracked under the impact, and dumped him on the floor amidst the debris. That only worked once, though, because as Ace's legs dropped after that kick, a second man took the first one's place and pummeled him, throwing hard fists into the young man's face and rocking his head back and forth. Ace tasted blood in his mouth, and his vision began to blur. A few feet away, Chance still battled with the sergeant. Chance was stronger than he looked, so he was able to stand toe-to-toe with the burly non-com and slug it out for a few moments. The real advantage Chance had was his quickness. He avoided some of the punches, drew the sergeant in, and then reached behind him to pluck a bottle of whiskey off the bar. He had spotted it a second earlier from the corner of his eye. Holding the bottle by the neck, he slammed it over the sergeant's head. Chance expected the bottle to break, but it landed with a dull thud and remained intact. The sergeant grunted, and his eyes rolled up in their sockets. He managed to keep his feet, but he was only half conscious. Chance dropped the bottle, lowered his right shoulder, and rammed it into the sergeant's chest as he drove hard with his feet. That knocked the sergeant backward into the men holding Ace. Legs tangled, and everybody went down, including Ace and Chance. The wild melee continued on the floor now, where sawdust damp from spilled beer and spit soon coated the clothing of all the men. A fight like this had only one rule: survive. Ace and Chance punched, kicked, gouged, and even bit. Ace scrapped his way to his feet. One of the troopers made it upright as well and clambered onto the bar. Ace wasn't sure what the man had in mind, but then it became clear as the trooper started trying to kick him in the head. Ace jerked aside and avoided the first kick. Before the soldier could try again, his other foot slipped on a puddle of beer on the bar, and that leg shot out from under him. He windmilled his arms in a frantic attempt to keep his balance, but toppled off the bar, bouncing on the back bar and taking down several shelves of whiskey bottles. These broke with a great shattering sound, and the liquor's raw reek filled the air. Chance grabbed hold of the bar and pulled himself to his feet next to Ace. The brothers, battered, filthy, in torn clothes, stood back to back and cocked their fists, ready to continue the battle if need be. Only 3 of the troopers were still in any shape to fight. The others, including the scarred sergeant, who seemed to be their ringleader, sprawled around in various stages of stupor, groaning and shaking their heads. The 3 who had suffered less stumbled upright and looked at each other, obviously unwilling to carry on, but not wanting to be the ones to surrender either, especially when they still outnumbered the 2 young strangers. The boom of a shotgun blast took the decision out of their hands. Everyone in the saloon, still coherent enough to do so, turned to look at the entrance, where a man had just slapped the batwings aside and come into the place. He leveled the greener in his hands, with its still unfired barrel, at the men standing in front of the bar, and yelled, The next man who moves is getting a...
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.